Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Several new movies opened this past weekend that ended on March 31st, 2024, which was also Easter, but only one of them earned enough revenue to be in this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office. Though one movie in particular appears to have finally fully ended its theatrical run, Madam Web, which was the latest Marvel offering from Sony and Columbia Pictures that became the lowest grossing Marvel movie of all time, both domestically and worldwide, for those studios. So good riddance to Madam Web. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please subscribe to this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! We'll first do a quick recap of this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office. Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire opened this past weekend in the number 1 spot domestically by earning $80 million during its freshman outing. Internationally, the movie also earned $114 million to have a global gross opening weekend of $194 million, which is quite good. In second place domestically this weekend was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which earned another $15.7 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $73.4 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $18.7 million to bring its current international box office total up to $35.1 million. So globally, the movie earned another $48.9 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $108.5 million. So right out of the gate, in only one weekend, Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire earned nearly twice as much in worldwide box office revenue as compared with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire that took 2 weekends to earn. In third place domestically this weekend was Dune Part 2, which earned another $11.1 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $252.4 million, which makes the movie the highest grossing movie domestically of 2024 to date. Internationally, the movie earned another $32.7 million to bring its current international box office total up to $373.7 million. Globally, the movie earned another $51.7 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $626.1 million, which has made Dune Part 2 the highest grossing movie worldwide for 2024 to date. In fourth place domestically this weekend was Kung Fu Panda 4, which earned another $10.2 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $151.7 million, making it the second highest grossing movie domestically for 2024 to date, behind Dune Part 2. Internationally, the movie earned another $60.7 million to bring its current international box office total up to $195.6 million. So globally, the movie earned another $79.1 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $347.3 million. And finally, coming in 5th place at this weekend's domestic box office was the low-budget horror movie Immaculate, which earned another $3.3 million domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $11.1 million. Internationally, the movie has earned $1.4 million to date to bring its current global gross box office total up to $12.5 million. Going back to Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, it reportedly had a production budget of $135 million, which, when we multiply by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget, we get an estimated break-even point ranging from $337.5 million to $405 million. And that $135 million production budget is actually the smallest production budget for all of the Godzilla franchise movies that have been produced by Legendary Pictures and Warner Bros. Discovery. And just FYI, in this chart I'm not including Godzilla movies produced by Japan's Toho Company or other studios, such as the ghastly 1998 Godzilla movie that was produced by TriStar Pictures and several other studios. But the movie's $80 million domestic opening weekend box office is significantly higher than Warner Bros.' previous 2 Godzilla movies, and is more on par with the 2014 Godzilla movie's domestic opening weekend box office of $93.2 million. Now, to project what the final domestic box office for Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire might be, I'll use a range of average weekly drops that are based on one standard deviation above and below the overall average weekly drop for the past 3 Warner Bros. Godzilla movies, which is 40.53%. And with a standard deviation of 7.63%, that creates a range from 32.89% to 48.16%. Using that range, I can project that the final domestic box office for Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire may range from $166.1 million at the low end, $197.4 million at the mid-range, and $243 million at the upper end, which, again, is on par with the 2014 Godzilla movie's final domestic box office of $200.7 million, but significantly higher than the final domestic box office for the previous 2 movies of Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong. The movie's $80 million domestic opening weekend box office alone is 72.4% of the final domestic box office that 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters earned, as well as being 79.27% of the final domestic box office that 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong earned. So this latest Godzilla movie is doing rather well, and part of that may be due to the popularity of last year's Japanese Godzilla movie, Godzilla Minus One. Now, to project what this movie's final global gross box office might be, I'll use the movie's current domestic share of 41.24%, which is actually more than one standard deviation above the previous 3 movies' average domestic share of 29.44%. Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire did open in China this past weekend, where it earned $44 million, but there are a few more countries where it hasn't yet opened, including Japan, where the movie doesn't open until April 26th. But using the movie's current domestic share of 41.24%, I can project that the movie's final global gross box office may range from $402.8 million at the low end, $478.8 million at the mid-range, and $589.3 million at the upper end. So Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire isn't going to have any difficulty breaking even. Now going back to Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, this is the 5th movie within the Ghostbusters franchise, which began in 1984. With a production budget that's only $100 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, we get an estimated break-even point ranging from $250 million to $300 million. As I had explained in last week's box office roundup video, while there are 4 previous Ghostbusters movies, the first one has such a low average weekly drop that it artificially lowers the franchise average weekly drop too much and also creates too large of a standard deviation to be useful. So instead, I'm using the past 3 Ghostbusters movies to create an adjusted franchise average weekly drop of 32.02% and a corresponding standard deviation of only 5.13%. which gives me a range of possible average weekly drops from 26.9% to 37.15%, which is a very reasonable range. And using that range in conjunction with the current domestic box office earnings for Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, I can project that its final domestic box office earnings may range from $121.4 million at the low end, $133.6 million at the mid-range, and $150.1 million at the upper end, which is slightly lower overall than last week's projections, and is also a slightly narrower range as I would expect. The movie's domestic share also dropped slightly to 67.65% from last week's very high 73.38%, which places it closer to the franchise's average domestic share of 63.46%. And when I use the movie's current domestic share of 67.65%, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $179.5 million at the low end, $197.4 million at the mid-range, and $221.8 million at the upper end, which is only slightly narrower than last week's projected range. So as of right now, unless the movie starts to earn a lot more money from overseas, Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire is more than likely going to flop, and it doesn't help that there appear to be no plans for the movie to be released in China. Currently, the movie may lose as much as $28.2 million to $120.5 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that the production companies behind it, which include Sony and Columbia Pictures, currently stand to lose anywhere from $14.1 million to $60.3 million. And this doesn't shock me given that 2016's female-led Ghostbusters flopped, and 2021's Ghostbusters Afterlife only marginally broke even. Going back to Dune Part 2, using the same range of possible average weekly drops from 32.86% to 42.86%, as I had used in previous week's projections, my revised projections for the movie's final domestic box office earnings now range from $277.7 million at the low end, $283.6 million at the mid-range, and $291 million at the upper end, which is nearly the same as last week's projected range. And the movie's domestic share only dropped slightly to 40.31%, so I can project that the movie's final global gross box office revenue will probably range from $689 million at the low end, $703.4 million at the mid-range, and $722 million at the upper end, which is a slight improvement over last week's projections that suggests a much higher likelihood that the movie will break $700 million. Given that Dune Part 2 has an estimated break-even point ranging from $475 million to $570 million, which is calculated by multiplying its $190 million production budget by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, the movie has already broken even. And finally, going back to Kung Fu Panda 4, which is the last movie that I'll talk about in this video, this is the fourth movie in a franchise that has a franchise average weekly drop of only 28.52%, which is somewhat low, and its standard deviation is only 0.49%, which is incredibly low. In order to project how well Kung Fu Panda 4 might do domestically, I decided to multiply that standard deviation by 10 so that I could create a broader possible range of average weekly drops from 23.66% to 33.38%. And using that range, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for Kung Fu Panda 4 may range from $188.9 million at the low end, $198.1 million at the mid-range, and $210.6 million at the upper end, which is only slightly different from last week's projected range. But the movie's domestic share did drop quite a bit to 43.67%, as it continues to open in more countries, so I can project that the movie's final global gross box office will probably range from $432.5 million at the low end, $453.7 million at the mid-range, and $482.3 million at the upper end, which is higher overall than last week's projected range and effectively indicates that the movie is going to break $400 million globally, but probably won't break $500 million. But given that Kung Fu Panda 4 has a production budget of only $85 million, when multiplied by 2.5, we get an estimated break-even point of only $212.5 million. So like Dune Part 2, Kung Fu Panda 4 has already broken even. So while Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is probably going to flop, Dune Part 2 and Kung Fu Panda 4 have both already broken even, while Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire is well on its way to breaking even. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.